They say empires are born from fire, and the Carolingian Empire was no exception. Forged by ambition, faith, and the sword, it rose from the ashes of Rome to become the most powerful kingdom Western Europe had seen in centuries. At its heart stood one man, Charlemagne, a warrior king who dreamed of unity, discipline, and divine order. But behind the legends of conquest lies a more complex story. A story of how ordinary men were turned into soldiers, how loyalty replaced law, and how a dream of empire slowly became the foundation for the world of knights and castles that followed. This is the story of how the Carolingians built their armies, fought their wars, and shaped the Middle Ages. When Charlemagne ruled, war wasn't chaos. It was planned, organized, and recorded in ink. His empire didn't just fight with swords, it fought with paperwork. Royal decrees called capitularies were the backbone of his rule, laws that decided everything from taxes to military service. Each decree told men what they owed to the empire and to God. Every free man had a duty to serve. If you owned enough land, 4 manses or more, you rode to war fully armed. If you owned less,
refused to serve, and you'd pay the hairy Banus fine, 60 solidii, a ruinous penalty that reminded everyone in the Carolingian world defense was duty. Some brought spears and shields, others chainmail and horses, but all marched under one banner, the cross of Christ and the seal of the emperor. Historians still debate whether these laws were rigid or symbolic. Were they enforced like Roman orders, or simply royal reminders of what loyalty should mean? Whatever the truth, they show us something powerful. Charlemagne's empire didn't survive on faith alone. It survived on organization.
But organization was only half the story. To understand how these armies truly fought, we need to step into the mindset of the warriors themselves, men bound not by law, but by loyalty. This was the warband world. Historian Timothy Reuter called it the warband model, the idea that Carolingian armies weren't great masses of farmers, but elite circles of mounted warriors bound to powerful lords. Each noble, each magnate, led his own warband. They weren't just soldiers, they were brothers in arms. Their loyalty wasn't to paper laws, it was to their leader. They swore oaths, feasted together, and shared the spoils of conquest.
When the empire expanded, rewards flowed. Gold from the Lombards, silver from the Avars, and glory on every battlefield. But when the borders stopped growing, the spoils ran dry. And with them, the loyalty that had bound the war bands began to fade. Without new lands to conquer, warriors turned their ambitions inward, toward politics, toward courtly power, toward the emperor's favor. The warrior elite became nobles. The empire became a competition for influence. And while the aristocrats argued, Reuter believed this was the turning point, when the Carolingian system shifted from glory to obligation. The empire began forcing men to defend what they had, not to seek what they didn't. And the proud warbands evolved into a network of duty and bureaucracy. But not everyone agrees. Some say this view is too romantic, that the Carolingian army wasn't a fellowship of heroes, but an early experiment in logistics and order. Which brings us to the other side of the story, the Roman continuity model. Centuries after Rome's fall, its spirit still haunted Europe. Charlemagne saw himself as Rome's heir. He revived Latin schools, built palaces inspired by Roman architecture, and on Christmas Day in the year 800,
He was crowned Emperor of the Romans. For him, ruling wasn't about fame, it was about restoration. He wanted to bring back what the world had lost: order, discipline, and unity. In this view, the Carolingian army wasn't a band of nobles, it was a system. Counties became military districts. Each count was both judge and commander, tasked with raising soldiers and collecting supplies. Every man, rich or poor, owed something to the empire. It was, in many ways, a rebirth of the Roman levy. Even the capitularies resembled Roman edicts, official documents meant to keep the machine of war running. Wagons carried supplies, priests recorded troop lists, officers enforced discipline. The empire wasn't built on passion, it was built on procedure. Some historians, like Janet Nelson, believe this shows a deliberate attempt to recreate Roman order. Yet others remind us the Carolingians didn't truly revive Rome. They borrowed its image. Their armies were smaller, their reach uneven, and their command decentralized. The emperor dreamed of Roman order, but his nobles acted like local kings. Even so, the Roman spirit endured: discipline, hierarchy, duty. It was the soul of the Carolingian war machine, and it shaped how Europe would fight for centuries to come. But every system, no matter how strong, has its breaking point. When Charlemagne died, he left behind not just an empire, but a question: who could hold it together? His son, Louis the Pious, tried. He ruled with honesty and faith, but not with his father's iron hand. And in an empire held together by force, gentleness could be fatal. The old unity began to crack. His sons fought over inheritance. Nobles carved out their own power, and the once mighty Carolingian army splintered into private forces. The counts, who once served the emperor, now served themselves. Outside, danger closed in. Viking longships on the northern rivers, Muslim raiders in the Mediterranean, Magyar horsemen from the east. But inside, the empire was already collapsing. Without a single central army, each lord raised his own soldiers, men bound not to a nation, but to a master. The old imperial host disappeared, replaced by personal armies tied to land and loyalty. The age of empire gave way to the age of feudalism. War was no longer about empire, it was about survival. And from this chaos, a new figure rose: the knight, Christian servant. He became the bridge between the old world and the new. By the late 9th century, the Carolingian Empire was gone, but its influence remained. Its laws shaped medieval kingship. Its system of land for service became the structure of feudal Europe. And its spirit, that blend of faith, duty, and discipline, became the code of knighthood. So when we picture knights riding under banners, castles rising over green hills, and kings commanding armies bound by oaths, we're seeing the echoes of the Carolingians. They were the bridge between Rome and the Middle Ages, between order and chaos, between empire and kingdom. Their fall wasn't the end of an era, it was the beginning of a new one. The Carolingians may have vanished from history, but their heartbeat still echoes in every story of chivalry, conquest, and faith that followed.